but this is what we do in Music Policy Forum. So it is my immense honor to introduce Emily Fox, who is going to be leading our keynote artist discussion. Emily is the producer and a host of one of the best shows on radio, Sound and Vision, every Saturday morning on the legendary KEXP. We are thrilled that she's here. We're thrilled everybody's here. Emily, take it away.
Hi everyone, thanks so much. Thanks N3ptune for that musical break that we all needed for our hearts, our souls. I got goosebumps. Yes, like Michael said, host KEXP. My show is very much about talking to artists about the story behind their music. I'm gonna have everyone introduce themselves, but I'm very excited that Dessa is sitting next to me because, actually, I'll explain later. How about everyone introduce themselves? And then we'll get into the conversation. Dessa, you start.
I'm Dessa. I am a touring musician and writer.
Hello. Hi, my name's Eric Gilbert. I live here in Boise, Idaho. I have toured before. I was afraid you guys were going to make me sing, so I'm glad that's not the case. And I'm one of the co-founders of Treefort Music Fest here in town and Duck Club Presents.
Hi. My name is N3ptune, N3ptune is the first E and the 3, baby, it ain't me.
How's it going? I'm Rusty. I'm a musician, producer, artist. Yeah.
Oh, before I keep going, what's my out time?
How much do you want?
Oh gosh. Well, I plan for 45.
Yep, do it.
Okay. So that's my out time. Do the math for me real quick. Thank you. All right. Okay, so Dessa, so you grew up, what's cool about this panel is we're coming from lots of different regions from the country, not just the Cascadia region. And so I'm curious how the music scene's evolved in each of the places where you all grew up, because I think it helps inform all of us what we could be doing differently. And Dessa, you like myself grew up in the Midwest, you specifically from Minnesota, Minneapolis. And what is interesting about where you grew up in the artist community that you were involved with is there was a community around hip-hop labels. Can you talk a little bit about Doomtree and Rhymesayers and how that helped cultivate an artistic community within Minneapolis, Twin Cities?
Yeah, so I think I entered the music industry essentially right after the big collapses that were caused by a lot of the lossless digital media, right? So Napster was there, and people who were like 2 and 3 years older than me were like, what's going on? And so, but I was just kind of tiptoeing over their agonized expressions, kind of new to the world. And I knew that it was a horrible time to enter music, but it's like the only time that I was alive. So what are the other options? And I knew also that in a place like Minneapolis, which I think mimics and mirrors a lot of the stories that I've heard told in Boise, it was really unlikely that you were going to be headlining a show and there was going to be somebody in like a cool gray suit with crossed legs smoking inside with a contract in his pocket to sign you and save you from your own life. It was going to happen because you and your friends figured out of Legos, some sort of system based on spit and fairy dust and duct tape to like get in the van, sell your own stuff, print your own t-shirts, learn how to write a press release, and then find out the names and addresses of the reporters to send it to. I didn't realize at the time how much, I think we would now call it like apprenticeship was happening in that time, and that other artists were game to be like, that's not how you do it. BCC means they can't see the other ones. You know what I mean? But that's kind of those informal ways that artists kick in it. If you were a DJ, carrying the vinyl, right, was the way to get close enough to somebody else's crates to see what they had, figure out how they were blending. And if you were a rapper, like for me, the first time that I rapped in front of an artist who I really cared about and was impressed by was like in the parking lot of an old country buffet. And I was too shy to do it with him in the car, so he just got out of the car and pounded out a lunch table beat on the hood so I could rap to the aluminum pounding above my head and roll down the window so he could listen. So there was a lot of do it yourself, which takes time. It means slow growth. It means we stayed broke for a long time. And it meant that we made all our own calls. We could make any of the music that we wanted to, even if it was an 8-minute song with no repeating chorus that seemed very unlikely to make it on the radio. It meant that I could wear whatever the fuck I wanted as a woman working in music, and I didn't have to ask permission about it, which was a really big deal then for me. And now, I think all of a sudden we're all DIY in a serious way, as a lot of the majors have collapsed. So even though it's slow growth, I think one of the benefits is like, because the major labels and the major scouts and the major infrastructure sentries weren't there to help you up, but they also weren't there to tell you where you weren't allowed to go. It was all off-roading, so we could do big, weird collaborations with a metal band and a youth choir and like a flamenco troupe. And no one was there to say that won't work. You know, we got to try it. Did it work? I don't want to talk about that at this time. But sometimes it did. You know, sometimes the unexpected thing that a risk-averse industry professional would be really unlikely to back, we had the opportunity to try and see if the kite would fly. And creatively, that's been a big boon. People who were like rhyme sayers, which, you know, I was in a crew called Doomtree, very DIY, all of us artists, hey. And that's still who puts out my records, 20 years later, almost now. And we had dreams of getting signed. You know, we were mailing out burned CDs to the addresses that we found online, so like the HEP labels. But by the time we actually got an interview, and this only happened once for me, I'll admit, but by the time we actually sat down with a label and they slid that deal across the table, I went, we do all this already now. We became an LLC because we had to, right? We figured out where to drop the CDs at Best Buy personally. If we signed this deal, we'd make less than we do now. Because of necessity, we had forged some of those relationships. So it was a chip on shoulder, but I think there was also a flag to be flown about the grind and the hustle. And I'm sure that that's, in hindsight now, we can look back on that with new eyes about like, what is labor? How should people be compensated? None of us were taking that money home. And we did have interns that we didn't pay. But I admit that in the moment and in the spirit of things, it felt like making something out of dust and figuring out how to send it around the country and eventually around the world. And we slept on floors, but we slept on floors in Italy, and that was cool.
So Eric, you obviously, you help organize Tree Fort, which I have attended and I am such a huge fan of. You know, for those, I think probably most in this room probably know what Tree Fort is, but if not, I mean, you just take over all of downtown, which is incredibly walkable. You get to see so many different venues or just bars, spaces, and just like, for someone that had never been to Boise before, I got to experience all of Boise by coming here for 2 or 3 days for a festival. Like, I got to really see what Boise was about, and I was like, wow, what a great thing, just like for tourism, but just like for the city itself, for people to like come here, see music for that many days, but just really experience the city through that. And you know, I was talking to you, and I mean, you come from, you know, DIY music community. And you saw some things that were lacking in the region, specifically that touring was really hard in the West. You know, there's a lot of rural areas, so how do you get from point A to point B? So can you talk a little bit more about the inspiration behind Tree Fort and the impact that it's since made to the music community here?
Yes, I kind of want to build off of what Dessa was saying, which, hi, nice to meet you. Yes. Coming out of the DIY world, like, and this is kind of what I think is why it's important to have creatives at the table in general, is creatives and musicians, we naturally, that's just in our DNA to like, we're wanting to create something out of dust, right? We're like looking for opportunity where we can make the world better, right? And so I think one of the beautiful things about the DIY community too, it's very interdependent, very collaborative in nature. You know, at that time, I was booking all of our tours, but I was sharing spreadsheets with other bands on where the best places to play were all around the country. And so we were all rooting for each other and helping each other get through those things. Now, be it here, but also interdependently around the country. And so for me, like, what I loved about multi-venue festivals was it's a great way to discover a city, but it was also where a lot of us artists got to be with each other, see each other play, and not just see each other's posters that they're going to be a week after us at the same space. And so it was really a time, it was sort of like where bands could celebrate each other. And so, and at that time when we were touring out of here in 2000, out of Idaho a lot, when 2007, 2011, a lot of people, it seemed like, didn't even know where Idaho was on the map, and definitely didn't think we had a music scene. And so there was, and then there was the flip side is there was all these touring artists that didn't realize there were music fans here that they could stop in Boise and not have to drive all the way from Salt Lake to Seattle, which, if you're from Europe, that's clear across Europe. So the foundation of Treefort was really built on this notion that, like, well, let's bring people here, let's help touring artists realize that there's a place here, and let's bring visibility to the local artists and build this whole, if you're in the original music space, it's an import-export business. You can't play, like Ben talked about this, you can't play every month really in your hometown, so you have to be able to get out. And so, but then growing up in spaces like this, we also love living in these places. I was annoyed with this notion that I had to go somewhere else to really pursue what I love. Now, I've converted that personally into more being, I was reflecting on this a little bit. Props to Michael Bracey and Kate and Ashley from the Music Policy Forum and everyone else that's helped put this together, because what I love about what we're doing with Treefort and what I felt like the last couple of days have been about, it's about getting a bunch of people in the room and just letting them talk and see what they do. And that's what, a lot of people ask us, why so many bands at Treefort? And it's because to represent a lot of different voices, a lot of different regions, there's a lot of different people. And so for us, the way we look at it is we're curating for the artist experience first, and then we're inviting the public in to see what artists are excited about. So I know most of you already know this, but if you don't know any of the bands, that's okay. There's no assumption that you should, and that's why Treefort is a festival of discovery, and it's really about training listeners to listen to music and go out and discover things and not just, go pursue. A lot of people buy tickets just for people that are famous, which is fine. You can do that, but there's a lot of incredible music out there that is worth taking a chance on. So that's the foundation of what Treefort is built on.
And that you also champion a lot of emerging artists, which KEXP's radio station also loves. So N3ptune and Rusty Steve, I'm curious, coming up in Denver, how would you describe the music scene there and how you've been able to make a name for yourselves in that city?
Denver is very eclectic. That is the word that comes to mind first. There's so much variety. You have your cover bands, you have your jam bands, you have the mixture of both, you have your hip hop scene, you have your Latin community. Like, there's just such an array, which I mean, from us, they would hear, I think everybody has that. But for a spot like Denver that really does not have an industry, there's no rules about, whereas you go to an LA, there's almost some sort of rule book. You go to New York, there's almost some, there's these channels you have to follow and these routes that you have to go in order to start making it. Denver is almost the perfect training ground to build from the ground up as an artist, to actually go out there and get it yourself. Piggybacking off of what Dessa was speaking about being DIY. You have Denver Art Society and the whole Santa Fe district that has First Fridays. When I was coming up, that's where I was performing every single month, damn near every single week. That's the first time I was performing my music in front of people, and I was performing all the time. It served as artist development, and I was doing that constantly, until opportunities started coming my way. I, of course, had to work my behind off and just show up in spaces and not even singing in order to, get into those rooms. But it taught me how to network very diligently and very effectively. It taught me how to be ready just in case anything happens. Someone come through, somebody is sick, and then they're like, somebody up in here and they know how to sing, and baby, my USB is right here, what you need, what you want. You know what I'm saying? It's such a perfect training ground. You can collaborate with people. There's different, there's so much I was able to be a part of a camp that would do mixers. They've had industry nights, and we would end up doing full-on studio sessions, and songs would come out of that. I was training on how to work in the studio effectively and on a time constraint. It's like, okay, yeah, it's a mixer, but at the same time, we gotta pay light bill up in here, so don't be going all night. So you learn how to work effectively. You learn how to, and if you're taking those opportunities, it's a perfect place for artist development. Having organizations such as Youth on Record and Sonic Guild that are, and the support of the city of Denver, in the city, they pay attention and they take notice to people who are, doing the groundwork and really showing who really wants it, but then also making an impact within the community. You have so many people who are, in my opinion, they're geniuses in what they do. And it's so much untapped potential that is out there. Yeah, it's a perfect training. I don't want to take up too much time.
Yeah, hearing you talk reminded me about, both of us have been playing music our whole lives, but there was a lot of things in my childhood that helped me foster my musical ability. There's this DIY venue in Denver called 7th Circle, and that was where I was able to learn how to book shows and play shows and have my friends come out and just learn the ropes in not a dangerous environment in any way. And it was just a community that was dope to be a part of. And we actually met at this camp, Links Denver. Yeah, I learned a lot about the music industry there. And obviously we were able to meet, and we wouldn't have met any other way if it wasn't for that camp. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. So, Dessa, you have a lot of ideas about how to make the music industry more efficient. So I'm going to rapid fire through some of these ideas that you have shared with me before, because I know there's lots of other questions I want to ask the panel, but one of which, let me back up. So what I tried to say at the beginning that I didn't want to give away is that I remember when I started my show, I was like, I really want to talk about artists that have really interesting backstories behind their albums. Who should I talk to? And they're like, well, Dessa just put an album together after working with neuroscientists to look at her brain to fall out of love with her ex. And I was like, that's a story, okay. They're like, oh, but we already interviewed her. Dang it. And so that project not only inspired an album, but also has inspired some merch. Tell me about some of your merch that you've been able to sell and just how much of that also just as I know, I think everyone knows, with the streaming economy, you have to think of lots of different ways to make an income work, and merch is one of those parts of the equation. So talk about some of the fun things that you've done with your merch, that including something that has to do with that neuroscience brain image.
So in some way, I share this as a success story and a story of failure, and that I think the reason that artists have had to be so innovative in their merch game, right, is because all the other games are very hard to monetize. So the joke in my band was always we're not musicians, we're traveling t-shirt salesmen, right, and our ad is the song that we've written, I made on my last tour more money by, probably a factor of 3 selling dish towels than I did vinyl,
With the really
exactly.
awesome...
That tone, whoever said that was right. Yeah, it's not that big a win,
It was a really good lyric, though, on the dish towels.
It's pretty hot. But, so for this project, I had, to maybe kind of tagging into what Terry had mentioned in the last panel about just working across whatever venue, whatever disciplines your skill sets allow you to access, to diversify your income, and in that way also shield yourself from changing, shaky markets. I had worked with a series of neuroscientists, shout out to the University of Minnesota, and to neurofeedback practitioner Penny Jean. I had essentially imaged my brain following some previous protocols that had already been done by a scientist, Dr. Helen Fisher, who put people who were in love into an fMRI machine. That's the one that can monitor the activity of your brain in real time. And as they contemplated images of people with whom they were in love, a particular part of the neural anatomy would consistently activate. There's 3 parts. One of them was called the caudate. Short story long, I went in to a 7T, a very high magnet fMRI machine. The world spun. Some people can taste metal because the magnets are so strong when you go in. We imaged my brain, and the lab was kind enough to give me a 3D print of that part of my own brain, and I got to hold it in my hand. And I was tweaking out as a student of science and as someone who was in love with this guy who had been trying to excise that particular love for a really long time. And I thought, yo, this would be kick-ass merch. So we took it to a jeweler, we bronzed it, and we sold it for $85 a pop. And they went out of sale pretty quick. So we bronzed it, and then I also printed drinkware where we used thermal ink so that you could see my profile in silhouette on an fMRI machine. And then when you filled it with real cold bourbon, that part of the brain would light up in love.
Pretty cool. So speaking to this idea that, just trying to make it work financially, you also had some ideas of just like how to make things work with a shoestring budget. Like, hey, I want to shoot a music video. Let's work with the local, film school. Like, what are some ideas in your head of like how to make it work especially if you're up and coming on a shoestring budget?
Yeah, I mean, talking about like the sharing of resources, and I was visiting with the students today at Boise, that it is not the case that your biggest competition is an artist similar to you. Most people, if they really care, can come on both Thursday and Friday night to a show, right? Your biggest competition is like folding laundry. I have to make sure my concert warrants you doing laundry on the weekend. That's my biggest competition. And there are so many resources that artists can share that are $0 and 0 cents, where somebody is a great photographer. And I say, I am a lousy photographer. Will you take my press shot? I am a very good writer, and you can't write. I will write your bio. And then you've made a really natural exchange. And if somebody's got that press list, offer to drive on their next tour. You know what I mean? Do a favor for them where you say, can I get that press list? Because that took 12 hours to create and another 5 to maintain. An accurate press list is priceless. And you've definitely got some labor that they'd probably be willing to trade for it. So I think the idea that, that your most immediate peers are antagonistic is entirely unfounded in this industry. On other things, it's true. If you're selling soap, people only need so much. You'll buy his or you'll buy mine. It's not like that with music. We can rise together. And there really is a tide that lifts most ships in the vicinity. So I think there's a lot of hustling for free that can be done in a bartering economy while people are struggling how to figure out how to get in the black for that first time on the record or for the first time on the 4th record.
So again, in one of those ideas again is like, working for a film school to help film a music video. And in N3ptune, I was talking to you about trying to film a music video, which I found really, really interesting, is that you just tried to shoot a music video in Denver at a public pool. Talk about that process. And then Eric, I want you to jump in to also provide some insights of how to make it work as an artist and how to make it work where you're more in tandem with your city government to make sure things actually happen. So N3ptune, talk about that experience first.
I don't know why this like sigh always comes out every time I tell this thing. It's just, oh Lord. So we were working on music videos for the year, and just trying to be ahead of the curve. Also, just trying to maximize the music. You know what I'm saying? It's a very visual-based industry, So it was okay. Well, we got to work on it. I had essentially wrote like 6 to 7 music video treatments for the exact same song, and this was one of those 7. And I think we can see by how I dress, baby is a little eccentric with the ideas. So it was, let's scale it back a little bit and see what's affordable. And so I wanted to have something that was like impactful and spoke on something that was culturally significant, but then also just visually pleasing. I had the idea of filming a music video in an empty swimming pool, speaking to creating this, this conversation, not a conversation, but just really addressing how Black people are not allowed to be in swimming pools in America, and just segregation and how deep-rooted it was, and how you have like Howard, to pass in order to like graduate, you have to like pass a swimming course, and just addressing these things in history, they just haven't been spoken about. So what did I do? went ahead and called a couple people. I was on the phone with Corey. Hey, Corey, how you doing? He was up here earlier. And so I called around the city of Denver, just different pools that I knew of, and it was constantly, let me check. Waits 15 minutes, waits 30 minutes, waits 45 minutes. Yeah, we don't know how that would work. Okay, I would just need 2 hours. Can you check? Yeah, we don't know, but you could try calling. So I called literally so many people in so many different rec centers, public pools, whoever had a swimming pool in the Denver metro area, and everybody gave me the exact same answer. I called so many times, I got back to the first number I called. So much so that one of my friends who's also our DJ, his mom, I guess, works for the city of Denver, and was like, yeah, I was talking to my mom the other day, and she was like, yeah, I think N3ptune was calling around looking to film at a swimming pool. I was like, so we know what baby wants, but we not trying to figure out how we can make 2 hours of filming work. And it's essentially all that goes to say, sometimes getting locations to film the videos and just get your ideas out, it can be very just cut and dry of people people lack creativity in some of these areas within like states, cities, or whatever, or there's just like these weird hindrances that actually make no sense. What is 2 hours gonna do at a rec center that's gonna infringe on like some sort of like, they act like it's the end of the world. If you hear how they talk on the phone, oh my God. You think that you're asking them to like do a rocket science, or like tell them like the equation or the formula for quantum physics or something.
But Eric, I'm curious if you have any perspective, like, you know, for artists, like how do you work better, or how do you work well within, I guess, a city to make things work and make music easier to make?
So I think the crux of the last couple of days, really. And so I think I sort of stumbled into this work because Treefort operated at such a scale that the city couldn't ignore us. In fact, I think I joked with you that after the first year, because we didn't know what we were doing as far as interfacing with the city, and there was enough blank space here that we just did it. And they were like, okay, that was cool, but could you talk to us next year about what you're doing? Because there's a lot of other city things that we should consider, you know? And so that's how I stumbled into this work of the interconnectivity of it all. And I think the issue of a singular artist calling on this is like, that's just one person. But I think what we've heard from city leaders throughout the last couple days, and I'm thankful to have a city here in Boise that will listen, is that if you can nurture that environment, well, they understand they don't understand what we need, right? And it's up to us to inform them of that. If you were here for Council President Halliburton's talk this morning, he really articulated that well. They don't have the time to understand us. It's up to us to inform them. And the best way to get to the table is to do it at scale, right? We just need to like get organized, and then when they let us in the room or they invite us, we just need to keep showing up. So I think one of the secrets to why I'm still here is I just kept showing up. They invited me once, and then they couldn't get rid of me. And so I think it's because it's work. It's work to show up. I mean, we've been here all day talking about stuff. A lot of us don't want to do that naturally, but it's important to take the time.
I bet you already handled it, and you may have a lesson to impart on me, but I was also looking for a video shoot location a few months ago, and I needed an aquarium real bad. And short story long, it was kind of cool working with this film group. Like I was trying to figure out where I had to pull permits from and where I didn't. And I thought it was interesting that for some cities, I don't know what Denver's rules are, but as long as you don't have 3 feet of a tripod on the ground in public places. Yes, if you just bring a monopod in New York, they can't say no, you're permit free. It's like football or something, like 2 feet in the end zone. So it might be worth looking up and then just rolling with a monopod and being like, call my agent then. Do you know what I mean? And just shoot and then ask for permission later and find out you don't need it. But
definitely in favor of that as well.
Well, something that has definitely come up today is also just diversity in the music industry. And I know in Seattle, and I'm sure this is the case everywhere, is we've been thinking a lot more about more diverse lineups at festivals, show bills. And N3ptune, I know you're very vocal and very passionate about diversity within the music industry. But as we're seeing more diverse lineups, more diverse, bills, what should people be keeping in mind once people of color or, folks that have been underrepresented, what should people keep in mind in terms of just treatment of those folks once they're in the room?
To address the elephant in the room, you're gonna learn I'm gonna say what's on my mind. There is this thing when Black people come into the room, people of color come into the room, but then also queer people, and then just so happens if you fall under that umbrella of both, there is this stigma that we don't know what we're talking about, we don't know what we're doing, and we don't know how anything works. Let that be how we appear, how we speak. If we don't speak the King's English, and we we speak a little Ebonics, or the tale as old as time, you just see the color of our skin. I've been in rooms, I've been in sound checks where sound guys, production will walk and speak to everybody else and not speak to me at all. I address them, nothing. I ask a question, it's now the end of the world because I'm now an inconvenience to them. And then when I correct them and tell them that the sound is trash because they're not listening, and they have preconceived ideas about who I am, what I do, and they got a chip on their shoulder, why? Not my business. Now it's some bigger issue that needs to be addressed. A lot of times when we're having these conversations about how do we embrace Black and brown people, queer people in this industry, which has so long been male and white male dominated, I feel like a lot of the answers I hear are very just elaborate for no reason, which I think there's a time and place. But it's something as simple as, can they do the job? Do they have the experience? Okay, so what's the issue? Get it done, hire them. Instead of going out of your way to give it to one of your buddies simply because y'all went to college together. I don't care that y'all went to college together. Your college buddy don't know what he doing. He don't need the job. He need to be interning. It's something as simple as we need to, the same way that we have, and this is something that it goes deeper than music. It is something that is deep-rooted in the fabric of this country, where it is breaking down barriers within selves of the preconceived ideas that you have for queer people, Black people, and people of color as a result of the long history that this country has rooted in racism. It is not that deep. If somebody can do the job and they're showing they can do the job, a lot of us are in this. You take everybody in this room right now, we up in here for a reason, because everybody has a perspective, everybody has a point of view that needs to be shared. It's a well-oiled machine with different cogs, just like a clock, that make it work. There's some people in terms of, I loved hearing about the Chattanooga district. I don't know why I called it a district, but it's not necessarily just the Chattanooga area. Hearing about just hearing somebody Black say these things about going about the music industry that's now so different. It's taking a lot of the same old approaches, but in these new ways, and just hearing, these are a lot of ideas that we won't hear from a lot of people because they're too busy trying to keep up with TikTok. Yes, it's competitive, but at the same time, that's that. How do we connect with people? An array of people and a diverse array of people without all the time having to make it this big thing where it's like diversity is great. Let's get to a point where we stop talking about it and let it just be diverse. So it's not, we don't have to keep talking about, how can we be diverse? How can we do this? Just let it happen, baby.
So we only have about 10 minutes left, and I still have one more question for each of you. So I'm gonna kind of do a twofer here, where I'm gonna ask a question, but also allow you some time to make any final remarks. So Dessa, one of the questions that I still had for you is, you have this idea, and I'm probably not saying the right word, but like routed tours. Talk a little bit more about how we can collaborate within regions to work more effectively to create just easier tours, just not having to reinvent the wheel every single time, but also keeping some room for you to make any final remarks on top of that.
I think like a lot of artists who are not from this region who are here today, the big struggle isn't to find value in Boise. It's walking past the cabin today, walking into these venues, like getting a great cup of coffee. Like, this is dope. I don't know how to get here without a parachute and a jet. But you know, and when I say that, I mean because most musicians travel by ground, most of them in pretty tight quarters and at pretty great expense, city to city. So the challenge for me coming to Boise has always been a great show. You know, the fans have been rad. They've bought merch. We've had a great time afterwards. But I gotta pay for a day before and a day after to route. So I spent so much time, I must have seemed like I just arrived on Earth to the people sitting behind me, like looking for smaller, like I have screenshots of like Bend. I could find an English prof in Bend, right, who would book me for one night to get here, trying to find ways in and out. And I think, to be honest, that so many of the challenges that are posed for ground touring mid-level artists like me, probably a little too small to play Tree Fort, so I'm like more of a 500 cap, have been answered, a lot of them in these discussions. You know, I got to meet Amanda and Nicole, and I got to chat with other people who are looking to solve the same problem. I do think that there are some things that artists can do. I hope I'm not stepping on your toes, N3ptune, but I think one of the things that surprised me has been like, yo, for all the railing against institutionalized systemic racism, sexism, kind of heteronormative, it's like you don't feel the small power that has actually accrued on you already. Like, what are all the names that I learned today that I can send home? Like, I learned how to rap from black folks. And I'm the one who gets called for speeches because I went to college with somebody. To be honest, I don't think they're trying to be mean. I think it's that they don't have numbers of those cats who didn't do the higher ed thing. That's where we met, and then they landed in a position of power. Do I think that they're mean? No. Do I think I'm mean? No. But unless we disrupt that, right, that's how the snowball goes down the hill. And so to try to find ways to share some of these resources, I'm so grateful that artists get to be in this room because I'm not in it that often, and it's so great to be able to say, let me take all these names, let me take all these email addresses, and let me mail them to the 5 folks that I wish were in this room too, to see if we can't find some lily pads to get into Boise, to get west, and then to get back east again.
Eric, I want to leave room for you to make any closing remarks, but also just overall, I mean, with Tree Fort and Duck Club being around for how many years now? Remind me.
Since 2012.
Since 2012, so a while. What kind of impact do you feel like you've made overall to Boise's music scene, but also just, you know, this section of the Northwest as well? And how have you seen that impact?
I think it's related to everything we just talked about, is like, I feel it's getting more voices in the room, essentially. You know, I think, once again, going back to the volume of artists at Tree Fort, it's one of the few festivals that a lot of artists even have access to. We have we have open submissions that are free, you know, and we have open music talks that are free. So I think, I mean, to the last two couple points, I think, and this is kind of what I think has been beautiful the last couple of days, is historically in the music industry, there have been not very many voices in the room. And the more we can expand the number of the representation in the room, the better the community is going to be. And it has helped make our community better here. I can objectively say that. And that goes everything, and I like to use this example because diversity shows up in a lot of different ways. It's also like the weird noise artist that couldn't get a gig previously, but now can get a gig at a festival here in Boise, where previously there was no way. Like, everyone's like, "What is this?" You know. And so, but it's realizing that's that person's voice. That's that person's representation of what matters to them. And I think realizing, and this is one thing I'm proud of with Tree Fort, is there's a lot of different disciplines represented, like story fort and drag fort and hack fort and comedy fort. That's not my doing. That's not someone else's doing. That's not part of that niche, right? It's like letting the people that know their community curate on behalf of their community, as opposed to superimposing what we think has value, because historically the music industry has been relatively small amount of those with power, essentially. And so, if anything, if we've shifted anything, at least locally or in the region, I hope it's that. So.
N3ptune, when I was speaking to you, something that you brought up, well, as we're talking about what could we be doing in the region, what's kind of some points of inspiration, you had mentioned Fort Collins Music District. Can you talk a little bit about that and what kind of your perspective is of it, and anything we could learn from what Fort Collins is doing?
Absolutely, and I'm gonna split this with him as
Yeah,
well, because
yeah.
I know he'll have something to say about it, and I want him to speak on it. There is a collective called the Music District in Fort Collins, and essentially, I like that you said short story long. That is hilarious to me. I love that. Artists able to go up there and work on music. You donate your time, teach a master class. That's what we did. We pulled up one of our sessions for one of our songs, taught about it, spoke on it, and we worked on music for like 6 days. And it was literally, I heard somebody speak online, and they were talking about how artists, like, in order for us to make great art, it's not always our job to be a marketing team, i.e. creating, promoting all the time, you know what I'm saying? But to really just go away, say screw the world, and go create. And that's really what that was. And knowing that there isn't like a resource like that, and knowing what we were able to create in that time, is absolutely transformative on our artist perspective. Eat that up.
I'm trying to think what else to say about it. No, but yeah, they put us up in this house for free for 6 days to record with really nice equipment that I wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to use. Like they had, I don't know, like people who know gear in here, but they had a Prophet 6, which is like a really, really nice synth that I've like dreamed of using, and for 6 days I was able to use it, and it was amazing. We made like probably one of our favorite songs using that synth, and yeah, I guess my closing remark would be it's been nice like listening to all these different perspectives, and I feel like yeah, I've had my mind open to different perspectives that I wouldn't otherwise have gotten to hear.
Before we wrap things up, but do we know how is that district funded though?
Philanthropist named Pat.
Philanthropy, yeah.
Yeah.
Only
There's a foundation, a family, yeah.
Wow, nice.
Which, hint, hint.
How do we find more of those? All right, well, our time is up. Thank you all so much. Thank you for all your perspectives. Thanks, everyone, for being here.